Hi there, this is Elena with Black Sheep 303 Creative, and today's project is a birthday card I made for my mother-in-law using sea turtles and distress inks. She absolutely loves turtles, and I am a total snorkeling fanatic, so doing a sea turtley underwater scheme for me was perfect, and I think she liked it as well. So to start off, I used some blue tape to protect the back side of my A2 card. So the blue tape is stuck down at the 4 1/4 mark. And then I cut these pieces of white cardstock into kind of wavy shapes. And I'm going to use them as masks as I take the distress inks and put them on that front of the card, going from light to dark to create sort of a wavy underwater look to it. I didn't have a stencil, so I thought I would just create my own masks and see how it went. So here's the first color, and I am using Tumbled Glass. It is the lightest color that I used for this, and could be the lightest blue in the distress line. I'm not totally sure, but it's a very nice oceany color. So I used that first, and I'm going from the craft mat onto the paper using like a circular motion, and then that mask is protecting the rest of the paper, as you can see there. And the second color I'm using is Mermaid Lagoon. And then I switched out my masks to create a different wavy look for this one. And for this color, I'm coming from the sides inward onto the paper. And that kind of created a blotchy effect on the sides just because of, it was getting more color on the edges. But that didn't really bother me. It kind of reminded me of how light looks underwater, like the way light beams kind of flow through the water. It makes light and dark patches, and so that worked for me, so I left it alone. And then my third color that I'm using now is Peacock Feathers, and it was probably the star of the whole thing. It's a much greener blue than the other colors that I used, and I think because of that, it really helps the whole thing come together. Like the turtles are more green and the other stuff is more blue, and so that kind of pulled the whole color scheme together, if you ask me. And here I am at the bottom, and I'm trying to make the darkest water, deeper water, and I'm using Blueprint Sketch, and this is the darkest color I used. And while it is dark, it also seemed really purpley to me, like too purpley. The rest of the colors seemed more blue, and that was just too purple. So what I did was I went over that whole stripe with Salty Ocean, and that fixed it. It basically toned down the purple, but it kept the darkness, and it made the whole thing much more of like a blue-green as opposed to a blue-purple color. I wanted to create the effect of bubbles underwater as well, so I'm using my Distress Sprayer, and I'm pulling down the trigger very slowly, only to about halfway, to get those big splotches. If you have one of these sprayers, you probably already know this, but there are two ways you can spray this thing. You can pull the trigger the whole way to create a fine mist, or you can pull it halfway to create that blotchy effect, and that was what I was going for. So that's why I was only pulling it halfway. I love that sprayer. I think it's awesome. So I blotted up the water to pull some of the color off and create those like sort of lighter colored patches to give the effect of bubbles. And I'm very carefully peeling off my blue tape, and voila, there is the background. It did work pretty well. It kept the ink off the back, and I like the colored variation. For the stamps, I am using the Sea Life stamp set from Local King Rubber Stamp. They are a Canadian company that I found at the Scrapbook Expo in Denver this year, so I bought their markers as well as this stamp set. The really cool thing about these markers is that they are designed to be they're designed to be used on their rubber stamps. And you're encouraged to use multiple colors, because what happens is the markers are somehow formulated to create a really nice blend on the stamp. It's not like a seamless blend, but somehow the colors kind of meld together and create this really pretty look once you stamp it on their specialty paper. Now I used 3 different shades of green and 1 shade of blue for my turtles, and for some reason you have to use the specialty paper. It does not work on regular cardstock, but when you stamp it onto their specialty paper, it creates this super vivid, really bright look, as you can see there, but it keeps the crispness of the stamp itself. So you get this colorful but yet very detailed image. And I actually am, that one there on the right, I actually did on Ranger specialty stamping paper, and that worked just as well as the Local King specialty paper, which is the turtle on the left, which I actually didn't use because it was too light in the middle, I thought. But I cut the turtles out and left a little bit of a white border around them, fussy cut them. And then I wanted to jazz up the card a little bit, so I'm going to use the Avery Elle Wonky Stitches die set to create a frame. And then I'm also going to use that banner in the middle for the greeting. And the greeting I'm using is "You're the Best" from the Hero Arts Everyday Sayings stamp set. And I'm going to cut the frame out of that sort of metallic-y blue paper that you see there. So I decided to heat emboss my greeting, and so I'm stamping it with Versamark ink. And one of the great things about clear stamps is they're so thin that they're easy to manipulate on the acrylic block. And so that's how I got that straight saying basically put into the same curve as the banner, just by moving it on the block to get it into the right shape, and then it maintains its shape while it's on the block, so you can stamp it on a curved line, and then once you peel it off, it goes right back to being straight. So that's really fun. If you haven't done that with clear stamps, it works really well. And now I'm using my, I don't know what I should call this thing. I should call it like my embossing helper. It's my ratty paintbrush that cleans all the little random specks of embossing powder off of places it shouldn't be. And now I'm heat embossing it, and I love metallic embossing powder because it's easy to tell when it's done. It goes from matte to shiny, and you know that it's complete. So here's the stitchy frame that I cut from that die set, and my turtles, and I'm trying to decide how I want to arrange everything. It's fairly self-explanatory, but I do decide that banner's a little boring at that point, and I will jazz it up here in a minute. I did want to mention that with that Wonky Stitches die set, it does not normally cut a frame. What it does is it cuts a rectangle with the stitch detail on the edges, and that's really cool on its own, but I wanted a frame. So when you run that die through your cutter or whatever machine you're using, it embosses a line on the inside of the stitched lines. I hope that makes sense. So it was really easy for me to just cut into the middle of my cardstock and then cut along that line to cut out the middle of the cardstock and create the frame. And I thought I would mention that because it's kind of a nice extra thing you can do with that die set, and it's really easy to do. So now I'm taping down everything. I used the Elizabeth Craft 6mm tape for that frame. It was like the perfect size. And then I'm using the ATG gun for my turtles. And I decided to grab my sequins to make my banner a little bit fancier. So I got some Lucy's Little Things sea spray sequins and used some gold stickles that you see there to finish them off. And I put those on either side of the banner to make it a little more special. And then I used foam dots to lift it up off the background and give it a little bit of dimension, since everything else was taped basically flat to the front of the card. And that kind of added a little extra detail to that little banner, along with like the stitching that's already on it from the die. And there you see the completed front. And now you can see the sort of shininess and the fun stitchy detail. And then there's the inside that I did with the matching dies, as well as a happy birthday stamp from the Penny Black A Sweet Day stamp set. There you can see some of the stitching details that the die puts in, as well as the colors of the distress inks on the background and the way the stamps the markers on the stamps kind of blended together. I did use some black glaze pen to add their eyes back in. And then this is the smaller Wonky Circles or Wonky Stitches rectangle, and then I just cut it off at the bottom in a wavy line and added the gold embossed greeting and the sequins to finish it off. And that's the card for today. I would highly encourage you to try doing a distress ink background like that, because it was really easy and it turns out really nice. Thanks so much for watching. As always, you can find more from me at my blog, blacksheep303.com. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to subscribe to hear more from me, please do so. I come out with YouTube videos regularly. As always, I love to hear from you. Leave me a comment, send me a question, idea, anything. That would be great. You can do it below or send me an email through my contact form on my website. Have a great day.